Welcome to this Compassion and Self-Care online workshop. Today is a brief introduction, but we hope that you find this helpful at a particularly difficult time where it is more important than ever to look after and be kind to ourselves. We have to also firstly acknowledge that this presentation was kindly shared to us by Dr. Debbie Woodward and developed by Robert Seal. So, introducing the content of today, we are going to be looking at an introduction to compassion and self-care, which is based on compassion-focused therapy. Compassion-focused therapy was originally developed by Paul Gilbert and is an evolutionary psychology model. Previously, this was a longer workshop and had a whole section on self-care, but we have found that people actually know what to do to de-stress most of the time, so today is more about the why it is so important to be compassionate to ourselves. In healthcare, we're often compassionate to others, but self-compassion can bring great benefits for our own well-being. The workshop today will be split into 3 parts. In part 1, we're going to be looking at the 3 threat systems. Next, in part 2, we'll be looking at how our brains have evolved and looking further into a definition for compassion. And then finally, in part 3, we will be introducing some techniques that will teach us how to be more compassionate to ourselves. So imagine walking down through this street. How would you feel? Generally, the kinds of responses that we tend to get from this picture is that there is some sort of threat or danger, and that people would be quite cautious and perhaps even walk a different route. As I mentioned previously, compassion-focused therapy is an evolutionary psychology model, and this model proposes that we have 3 different systems in our brains that help us to balance our emotions. The first system that we will be talking about today is called the threat system, and this image here represents that system. So the threat system is all about threat detection, survival of the fittest, the better safe than sorry approach. It is always on, scanning for potential danger. As living creatures, we are good at anticipating and avoiding threat in order to survive, as from an evolutionary perspective, it is better to be safe and overcautious, and this protective mechanism is hardwired within us all. Each of these systems also has different brain regions and hormones associated with them, here being the amygdala, the hormone adrenaline, and eliciting feelings of anxiety and anger. Okay, so as I previously mentioned, a positive of having this threat system on is that it prepares us for potential danger. Have a think about why having this threat system on or activated too readily could also be a bad thing. Some responses we tend to get is that having this type of system activated too readily could lead to us seeing threats that aren't actually there. For example, in this image, the facts are, it is a group of people who could just be queuing. We don't really know what's going on, but we create danger from small bits of information. No longer are we in caveman times where the presence of a saber-toothed tiger is the type of thing that triggers our threat system. In today's society, small mistakes or perceived flaws in our abilities, appearance, social skills, etc. are all seen as threats. These sorts of things are seen as risks to our reputation, social status, relationship, career, and so on. So our threat system seems to be on high alert for many of us most of the time, always on the lookout for potential dangers in order to protect ourselves. When we are in threat mode, our thinking can also become quite narrow and negative, and it can be quite difficult to think in a balanced, rational way, as our brains were not designed to be sophisticated when they are in danger. This isn't to say that the threat system is a bad thing. Its purpose is to keep us safe from legitimate threats, However, many of our mental health problems can relate to this threat system being active too much of the time when there is no real danger. So in sum, the threat system can be useful, however, balance is the aim. Okay, so again, like with the previous slide, have a think about what your initial thoughts and feelings are when you see this image. With this image, we tend to usually get responses of positive feelings such as reward, success, achievement, pure joy. So this second system that we are representing here is called the drive system. Its purpose is to motivate us to find resources. From an evolutionary perspective, it was vital to find food, shelter, and a mate, and the drive system spurs us on to try new things, to achieve things, and to set and work towards goals. It is what energizes us to get things done and to be active in life. The brain regions associated with this system are the nucleus accumbens, and dopamine is the hormone it releases. It also evokes feelings of a sense of wanting and pursuing. So the positives of this system are that it helps us function and motivates us to achieve our goals. Without our drive system being active some of the time, we would be rather lifeless and directionless, a problem that can occur when we feel depressed. The problem with this system, however, like the threat system, is that it can also kick into overdrive. This particularly happens if we live in a society that is highly competitive and gives us the message that we always need to do more and be better, and that if we do not achieve this, then that there is something wrong with us, which understandably is not always possible to do. An overdeveloped drive system can also be detrimental to us, as we will only ever feel good about success, and this therefore can be problematic in terms of our own well-being. For example, have a look at how distraught the man in the image is, who has come second in the race and therefore is the second best marathon runner in the world. Despite this, he is devastated. Relentless pursuit of something can also be problematic and can lead to addiction. So, in sum, the second system is called the drive system, and like with the threat system, balance is key. Okay, so finally, one more image here now. Have a think about what your initial reactions and feelings are when you see this image. Feelings of love, warmth, affection, and happiness are generally the kinds of responses that we get. And it is amazing that even just by looking at this picture, it can create a warm feeling. Our own experiences of being a parent or being parented are also going to influence what this feels like to you. But although growing up and learning this is important, it can be developed. So here we are talking about the third and final system, which is called the soothing system, and it has a key role in regulating the two other threat and drive systems. It is based in the prefrontal cortex and is associated with opiates and oxytocin. The soothing system is not just calming, but helps us to engage in things that we find difficult. Its purpose is to manage distress. For example, before diving off a high board, people tend to take a few deep breaths. The soothing system has a calming influence on both the threat and drive systems, helping to quieten them down when they are overactive. It is at work when we are chilling out, feeling safe, calm, and content. Experiences of kindness and care tend to stimulate the soothe system, and whilst receiving compassion from others is one way to unlock the soothing system, self-compassion is another key way. So, this soothing system allows us to be more balanced, present and relaxed, and to engage in things that we find difficult. For example, before we do something uncomfortable, such as diving off a cliff board, our soothing system will be telling us, you can do this. But if we haven't got that soothing system there, we may instead be telling ourselves, get on with it, via a threat-based drive, or engage in the drive system through threat. For example, telling ourselves, you'll feel a failure if you don't do it. A positive experience of caregiving growing up means that we can engage our soothing system more effectively. But although growing up and learning the system is important, the important thing is that it can be learnt and developed later in life, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in sum, this third and final system is called the soothing system, and it is key in regulating and balancing out the threat and drive systems in influencing our emotions. This slide shows a table of the three systems that we have just seen visualised from the three images previously, and this is looking at them in comparison to one another. So as I previously mentioned, compassion-focused therapy developed from research in neuroscience and evolutionary psychology and proposes that humans have these three different systems for managing their emotional states, with each system having different motivations, foci of attention, thoughts, emotions, and bodily feelings. So looking at these systems in comparison to one another, they have different motivation and attention. So with the threat system, the motivation is to survive, so our attention is very threat focused, whereas with the drive system, we are looking for goals and ways to achieve. And then with the soothing or caregiving system, as it's also known, it is about a recognition of distress in ourselves or others, and soothing and looking after ourselves. There is also different thoughts, emotions, and behaviours that we experience in these systems. So with the threat system, we have emotions like fear and anxiety, and behaviours like the fight, flight, or freeze response. And then with the drive system, our thoughts are very focused on how we are going to achieve our goals, and our emotions are very motivated. And then finally, with the soothing system, we have thoughts about caring and soothing, and a feeling of safeness and calm. This slide represents how someone's three systems might look in their mind. So in this example, the soothing system is quite small, and the drive and threat systems are quite big. So if we imagine that we have these three systems, we can see just how important it is for the soothing part to regulate the other two. It is also worth noting that in Western society, there is a pressure for having more and doing more, and Western culture and advertisements know how to use these systems to their advantage. So generally, our drive systems are going to be quite big. So what I'd like you to do now is to reflect on your own systems and how your own system might look. So try drawing how big your three systems are. And whilst you're drawing, I'd like you to think and reflect on which of your three systems is seeming to be the biggest. How do your systems relate to one another? And what sort of things are driving you and are activating your threat system? So all of this is about self-awareness. It might also be useful to do this in different scenarios, because it might be that your three systems are different when you're at home and when you're at work or when you're with friends. So being reflective and increasing self-awareness of how situations might differ can be really insightful. So the bottom line is we need all of these three systems, but it is important to notice when our threat system is being activated, and important to soothe and to regulate the other two so that we are not being triggered by things that aren't real threats. This brings us to the end of part 1. Next, please click on part 2, which looks at a definition of compassion and how our brains have evolved.